Welcome to the Superhumanized podcast. I am Ariana Summer, your host. Today's guest is someone whose work resonates at the intersection of science, sovereignty, and the extraordinary healing potential of the human mind. Brandy Gillmore is a mind-body healing expert, researcher, and inspirational speaker known for her groundbreaking discoveries on self-healing. After a debilitating injury left her in chronic pain and reliant on a wheelchair and cane, Brandy embarked on a remarkable journey, ultimately using the power of her own mind to heal herself fully. Her story is not just inspirational, it is instructional. Brandy's book, Master Your Mind and Energy to Heal Your Body, is a #1 Amazon bestseller. It outlines her gift mind body healing method, helping readers activate their body's innate ability to heal, blending neuroscience, emotional intelligence, and practical spirituality. Her work is changing lives and reshaping how people understand what is possible for their health. In this conversation, we explore the mechanics and the mystery of self-healing. We dive deep into belief, subconscious programming and reprogramming, emotional frequency, and what it means to reclaim the authority we have been taught to give away. Brandy reminds us that healing is not just possible, it is a learnable skill. This is more than a conversation about wellness. It's a powerful remembrance of the gift we all carry, the ability to become our own cure.
Superhumanize. Accelerated evolution.
Brandy, welcome to the Superhumanized podcast. I am so glad we get an opportunity to connect today.
Likewise, Ariana. It's so wonderful to be here with you today.
I am always thrilled when I can speak to an individual such as yourself, who is also so deeply immersed in healing. And your story, Brandy, is incredible, not just because of the healing you experienced, but because of how fully you've made it your life's work to support others healing themselves. I have the greatest respect for that, and it just resonates with me on such a deep level. Could you take us back, for those in our audience who may not be fully acquainted with your story, to that pivotal moment where everything changed for you, and walk us through what you discovered about the healing power of the mind?
Absolutely. I have to say, there are so many pivotal moments. And if I were to pick, let's say, one that was really hugely pivotal for me, was the awareness that people with multiple personality disorder could have different illnesses and different personalities. That was mind-blowing. And the reason for that is, this is literally the last thing I ever thought that I would be doing, is working with the mind. But basically, I used to do network engineering operations, and I had an injury. I had an accident, technically 2 accidents. I had a car accident and then a fall. And I fell just wrong, just right, however you want to say it. But I literally went from living a full life to being wheelchair, walker, cane, and in extreme pain and on morphine. I was an absolute mess for years. When my doctor said there was nothing else they could do, I started doing the diet and the supplements and then it grew into like meditation and positive thinking and affirmations and chanting and years of all of the things. And it wasn't working. Like, I was trying everything, and I could have ups and downs and whatnot. And I was just desperate. And I could see the power of the mind, the placebo, and more positive thinking. And so I just wanted results. And so I had been doing that for years. And I thought, how many years longer do I need to do this? But then when it wasn't working, I started looking at the medical journals and I said, okay, what is the answer? And when I found that people with multiple personality disorder literally could have asthma in one personality, but not in another, or high blood pressure in one, but not another. There was even a study of a woman who was medically blind in some personalities and not in others. And I was like, how do I do that? I need a personality that is healthy. And that made me want to figure out how the mind worked.
And this is truly so fascinating. And I think what really just touched me so much about what you put forth in the world is that so many people still believe that spontaneous healing is rare, that it's random or miraculous, or they think healing has to be tied to what you described. It's years of doing this and doing all the supplements and the treatments. But your work actually shows that it can be taught and even demonstrated live. And I'm curious, what are some of the patterns that you've seen in people who have been able to heal themselves, whether it's emotionally or physically? I would like to learn more about if there are any patterns. And then I'm also curious about what makes this process teachable.
Absolutely. A couple things is that if somebody had told me that I could heal with my mind back when I was first injured, I would have thought they were nuts. I would have thought I have real injury, real accident, real pain, real problems, my nervous system, my body, my bones, like I'm messed up. But the more I started looking at the mind, one of the things that I did is I simplified it and I said, okay, how can I see that the mind affects the physical body? Because like you said, there's spontaneous remission. We know that there's a placebo. So we can see evidence. And so one of the things that was really powerful and teachable and breakthrough was I said, okay, how can I see that the mind affects the physical body? Let me just simplify this because I have to figure this out. How do I simplify this? Emotions. If somebody's embarrassed, their face turns red, panic attack, racing heart, shortness of breath. And I thought, yeah, we know that. But then if we look deeper into emotions, we see that somebody can be scared to death. That's more than just a saying. They can be so scared their heart stops.
Yes.
Or I think we've all heard of somebody can die of a broken heart, where they can lose a loved one. Yeah. And actually die. And I thought, wait a second here. And research has even shown loneliness can increase diabetes or stroke or heart attack, or we start to see all these things, or even research has shown that and even suggests that stress can then cause autoimmune conditions or even lupus. So you start to see all of these emotional connections to illness. Now, something that was really helpful for me is I said, but wait a second here. I looked at it objectively and I said, wait, if stress is all that bad, then how is it possible for there to be people with PTSD, severe trauma, all of these things who aren't sick? There's officers or vets or military who have PTSD and they're not sick and physically. And there are other people with less stress who have severe illness. I said, wait a second. That led to a breakthrough that really helped me. And it was that the specific combination of emotions is key. And a simple way to think about it is to think of if somebody wants to make cake and they have flour, they can't make cake. But if they have flour and they mix it with eggs and butter, vegan eggs and butter and other ingredients, they can make a cake. And if they switch the ingredients, they make something completely different. And so that's how I also figured out how it was possible for people with multiple personality disorder to have different illnesses and different personalities. Okay, different combination of emotions. They could have personalities that were completely healthy. And so that's ultimately what I started doing, is understanding the combination of emotions and the specific combinations. And that was a breakthrough. You asked, are there specific patterns? And the answer is absolutely yes, but it depends on what type of illness. And that was just like somebody's embarrassed, their face turns red, panic attack is a different emotion. Sexual thought, sexual physical response, different emotion. Scared to death, different emotion. And so that's been the key, is just actually getting really specific with the mind and specific emotions and realizing they have a deeper impact than we think they do.
And in my different fields of work, I also come in touch with many individuals who are dealing with all kinds of different challenges and issues. Some of them also quite severe issues, from chronic pain combined with autoimmune, and then GI issues combined with severe depression and so forth. And I'm curious, what are some of the emotions or emotion combinations perhaps that have stood out most to you with regard to specific manifestations of illness, of disease? And then conversely, What is the recipe, so to speak? I love your analogy of making a cake. What is the recipe for having a balanced expression of the body and the psyche?
Absolutely. So starting there, the way that the reason that I've been able to show it under medical equipment and actually show results so you can see the mind body connection is by doing that, by addressing the specific emotions. And so when you say, what is the key to having the balanced? It's not just reprogramming the mind, it's repatterning the mind is a
Mm.
key. And a way to think about it is like this, is we have patterned ways of thinking and feeling and perceiving, acting and being. So I call there's certain pivotal things that we can change in our psyche to create that shift. And so to provide a simple example, let's say somebody has a patterned way of thinking and feeling and perceiving in fear, or somebody has a patterned way of thinking and feeling and perceiving in self-criticism, or thinking and feeling and perceiving as victim. And so what happens is these patterned ways of thinking and feeling and perceiving are so ingrained in our psyche and ways of being that it's like whack-a-mole. It's like somebody can perceive that in work, and then they come home and they might perceive that in the same way in this. And then, so it's like like a person who lives in fear is different from a person who lives in confidence, is different from a person who lives in anger and has a pattern. So it's really about going deeper in the mind and repatterning the mind and identifying those patterns, because that's where the key is. And that's why a lot of times, sometimes what'll happen is people will try to think positive and they'll get some results because they're trying to pull away from their patterns, but they didn't really repattern the mind at a deeper level. So then they'll go back into it, and we have to really repattern the mind. Now, so that's one thing, is understanding, identifying what patterning, just if you think about multiple personality disorder, where different personalities have different illnesses, we're literally changing the mindset. And that's when I've been able to show just fast results, is I take somebody and I identify, okay, what's going on with their mindset? What is the error, or what are the errors, and changing them. Now, another thing you asked is, you said, okay, what are these combinations? What are the cake ingredients, if you will, which is not cake, but exactly that. And that's what's also a little tricky when we think about the mind, is that, for example, it can be emotions where somebody has a specific emotion, self-criticism, or guilt. Those can be common patterns of emotions that are part of that, quote, recipe, if you will. Another thing that can be part of the recipe is a person's identity even. So what can happen is a person can have illness for so long, they can start to identify as being a person who's sick. And then they have this chronic condition, but then they go to get rid of this one and they have this one and this one. And so there's key ingredients, but that's ultimately is what can get linked up. Now, sometimes it can also be very counterintuitive. And an example is this. Sometimes people at a deeper level will get linked up that love is connected to illness, but they don't realize it. And a simple way to think about it is this, is a simple analogy is, imagine there's a young 1-year-old, 2-year-old child that falls and has an owie, and a loving adult comes by and says, let me kiss that and make that better for you. At that moment, owie can get linked up to love and kissing connection in their subconscious mind. And so what can happen is, even, let's say this adult grows up, they're 20, 30, 40, 50 years old, 60 years old. And let's say they start to find themselves lonely in life, and lonely or in love. They go through a divorce, they go through a hurt, the kids go off to college, whatever it is, some type of loneliness connection, or disconnected or unloved. The subconscious mind can say, I just need love. And that little 2-year-old self can say, I know how to do it. It's owie, because it's stored in the subconscious mind. And so it really depends on the person and their experiences, but it's just identifying what the specific errored links are and then changing those. And I have seen people heal from bedridden to running to autoimmune conditions to terminal, quote unquote, condition, all kinds of things, when they just identify the specifics.
Brandy, this makes so much sense. And it's also so thought provoking, because when we go back to someone who, as a child, may have experienced what you experienced, of course, it's not just, quote, love, but love and the attention that love brings is directly tied to the knowing that your likelihood of survival is much higher, right? So we want love, we want attention. When we don't have it, there's something very much also hardwired, in a sense, to our survival mechanisms. So it literally is existential. I think that's also why these things can anchor so deep. And what I'm really curious about, Brandy, is can you walk us through the process, maybe in a like bird's eye view, of how you can repattern this, or how people can learn to shift these types of emotions or patterns consciously? Because just positive thinking, as you said, may bring some results, but it's limited.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So a lot of times what specifically happens is there's some type of miswired mind programming. And so, like you said, it goes like love. We need love. And that's so we have to think about the awareness that many times when there's some type of illness, it is typically miswired to a need that we need. And once it gets miswired, it becomes locked in. So we need love. We also need safety. And so what can happen is also illness can actually be linked to safety. And so let me give you an example of what it would look like linked to safety. And I'll tell you as far as changing it, but a simple way to think about it is like this. Like there's an example I use in my book of a little boy named Johnny. And he would go to school and he would feel picked on at school. And then he'd get a stomach ache because he felt picked on. So he'd get a stomach ache and then he'd go home. And then when he goes home, his mom gives him soup and takes care of him and gives him all this love. And then he goes back to, he gets better and he goes back to school. And then he feels picked on again. And then he feels picked on, he gets a stomach ache. He goes back home. Now he's taken care of, he's nurtured, all of that. And this happens 4, 5, 6 times. His mind starts to link up. If I heal, I have to go back to school. Then I'm going to be picked on. So it is now not safe to heal. And by the way, if I stay sick, then I get more love and safety. And that's what got linked up in his mind. So now this kid was perpetually sick and sick. His body didn't even feel like it was safe to heal. And so now then the mother reaches out and she's like, my kid is sick all of the time. But it didn't feel like it was safe for him to feel. And it felt more love and safety to be sick. And so what happens is that's what I call our MBSS needs, or mind, body, soul, spirit needs. We need love. We need safety. We need attention. We need connection. So what happens is that when we get these miswired, when I said there's ingredients, these are part of the ingredients. And so what happens is when we get things like the self-image miswired, or things like our needs or love or safety miswired, that at a deeper level, it can keep you stuck. Now, when I say miswired, like what happened in my own situation is I mentioned I used to work in technology. And when everything happened with September 11th, everything with 9/11, so I was on the phone with somebody. So I was here in California. So I didn't even know it affected me the way it did, because all I thought was my coworkers in New York, what I was caring about them. But so my coworker started yelling, help me. And then the phone goes dead. And then for the next several months after that, I worked in telecommunications. So we watched the footage over and over from 9/11, and it was playing in the background. Now, me personally, all I wanted to do was help others. But I had this feeling that I was supposed to go die for others, that I was supposed to go die to go save others. And then also this feeling of expecting to die. Because if you remember during that time, there was like, are we in red zone? Are we in orange zone of alarm? So in the background while I'm working, it's constantly going, we're in red zone, we're in orange zone for attack. So then it was just getting ingrained in my subconscious mind, because literally, I mean, there was televisions on every single pillar around me. So I'm sitting there working, and that had been a pattern in my life was that you were supposed to die for others. Martin Luther King died for others. I grew up Lutheran, and Jesus died for others and whatnot. And so that had been ingrained in me as a child, that you should give your life for others. And so basically that's what I needed to fix. Was I had the expectation and also the desire to die for others that was wired in my mind, which was triggering my feeling of not feeling safe. And so I had to rewire that. And if you had asked me if I consciously had that, I didn't realize that was even triggered. So it programmed my mind in a way that I didn't realize what was happening.
Wow, Brandy. And do I understand correctly that because of how this was wired in your mind, that also at some point there might have been this, I don't know if you call it a decision, but the body went into, obviously there were also physical events, but that the body can go into not being well because that's a safer place in essence?
We could look at it in a couple ways. And I would say this. I would say that if we just look at healing in general in a big picture, there have been studies that show that people with, even after surgery, if somebody's optimistic, they can heal much faster. If they're in stress and negativity and fear, they heal much slower. And we could get technical and we could talk about cell proliferation and how fast the cells are regenerating and whatnot. But that's even after surgery or even any type of wound healing. Like we can see that healing is much faster with optimism, and with negativity and stress much lower, and also a much higher rate of complications and even death and all of that, even after surgery, right? So we could look at it on a simple note and say, I was injured and then my body didn't heal. But we could also look at CRPS, so complex regional pain syndrome or reflex neurodystrophy. It's got multiple names, but we could look at that, and doctors don't know why one person gets it after an injury and one person doesn't, because basically what happens is with CRPS, it was actually first diagnosed in World War II, where some people would get shot or injured or whatnot, and then they would end up with this neurological disorder, while some people would have an injury and didn't. So we could also say that I had all this stress in my subconscious mind that then when I had this injury that manifested, my body then didn't heal and also reacted and overreacted, and this injury happened. So we could say it for many different reasons. I would say it personally, I'm very spiritual, and I'd say everything happens for a reason, but we could look at medically, spiritually, whatever way you want to look at it. I would say that probably multiple things are true. It manifested for a reason is one thing. CRPS developed is manifested because of what was going on at a deeper level. And also my body did not heal because of what was going on at a deeper level. However you want to look at it, this is what, and so basically what I started doing is I started really rewiring this in my nervous system, that it's not so impressive to die for others. What about living? And so I really rewired my mind at a deeper level. I also had guilt for no reason and any reason. I have survivor's guilt. So I felt guilty for surviving. And I was like, okay, wait a second. This doesn't make sense. But I had a pattern of feeling guilt, even since childhood. Like what had been programmed into me from childhood was that if you feel guilt, it means you're a good person. It means you have a good conscience. And yeah, so that's miswired.
Yes.
So I was like, wait a sec, just being a good person makes you a good person. You don't have to feel guilty to be a good person.
Oh, amen.
So miswired. And we don't realize this stuff is there.
Yes. And Brandy, this leads me to a question. So someone that is dealing with a lot, right? Physically, maybe also mentally or cognitively, and obviously they're experiencing very real things that have very real impact on their lives. Would you, or how have you in the past perhaps, approached people who may initially have been a little bit resistant to the idea that a certain miswiring is actually a route to go to?
I think that is so easy. And the reason being is because that is me. If somebody had told me that I could heal with my mind, I would have thought they were ridiculous. They didn't understand where I was. I was world's biggest skeptic. I didn't reach out to mind body healing because I thought it would work. I reached out because I was desperate for anything. And of course, my injury was back in '03. So I've been doing this now. I've been working with the mind for over 20 years. Back then it was ridiculous. And that's also the reason that after I healed myself in 2010, so over 15 years ago now, I wanted to show it under medical equipment because of that very thing. And that's what made me show it under medical equipment, publish it in a medical journal, because I want people to see that we don't have to live our lives stuck ill and in pain and all of that.
Yes, for sure, Brandy. And I see it so often where year after year passes and individuals are still in a very similar place, even though they would like to get out of it. I think another thing that's linked to is also that we've been taught about what we've been taught about illness makes us feel passive, like something is broken or needs to be fixed by someone else. So, in your perspective, how can people begin to reclaim their inner authority? And especially when they may be dealing with things that are just overwhelming, like chronic pain or illness.
Yeah, I would say I absolutely get it. And I think that I went from that place of powerlessness to then also waiting for the universe to heal me, which ended up being another powerlessness of just waiting for my body to somehow just heal itself. And I think that the switch happens when I started looking at healing as a skill. And this is what I mean. We are all born with the ability to walk, to run, to talk, to write our names. And every single one of those we have to learn. We don't even know where our nose is when we're born, right? We don't, and we have to learn it. But once we learn where our nose is, hey, we've got that. We learn how to speak. Some people will take running to the next level and they'll run in the Olympics. Some people will take speaking to the next level and they'll speak 10 different languages. So we're born with these abilities, but how much are we going to master them becomes the answer. Now, our thoughts help create our lives and help heal our body. And that is written about throughout history. But most people never learn how to master their minds. And so when we start to realize that it is a skill, it is even written in the Bible. A merry heart is a medicine, ill thoughts will dry the bones, which is basically stress affects the physical body. And then we just have to take it to the next level. And so the more I really looked at the awareness of that, or even another example, if we go to psychology and we think about repetition compulsion, reenactments, which is basically very simply, unfortunately, if we think about a woman who has an abusive father, who moves in and finds the abusive boyfriend, boss, spouse, etc., that pattern can unfortunately continue, but our patterns in life repeat. And so the more I looked at the mindset through psychology, through neural pathways, through neuroscience, and understanding the mind and the repatterning, but also the emotions and the mind-body connection and psychoneuroimmunology. And the more I started just understanding how to get it to work, the more I realized it's a skill. And so when I started coming from that awareness of saying, okay, this is a skill that I need to get good at. And when I started approaching it with rolling up my sleeves and saying, okay, people with multiple personality disorder can have different illnesses and different personalities. It brought out an assertive part that said, okay, let me troubleshoot this. Let me identify the problem. Let me fix the problem. And then let me go on with my life. Let me heal. And which, again, I never thought I would be doing what I do now, but that has led to now I can show people back to back under medical equipment releasing pain, because then it was like, okay, let me continue to build on this skill and show others how to do it. So it's just been this incredible journey, life-changing.
It's been a beautiful journey that has touched countless people, Brandy. Something that I contemplate often is also fear. Fear can be one of the most powerful subconscious blocks to healing and also quite difficult to override. Do you have any particular techniques, tools, perspectives on how to help people break out of the fear loop, especially
Yes,
the physical symptoms reinforcing it?
absolutely. And it's a little tricky. Can be an absolute key to healing. And this is why. So fear can be very counterintuitive, and also it can be tricky. And for example, there's multiple reasons that fear shows up in the mind. Let's say, for example, somebody, I'll go to one of the counterintuitive ones. Let's say somebody has a pattern of getting sympathy, and that's how they get love. They have sympathy and they get love, and they have sympathy. So let's say as a 5-year-old, they linked up, they get love from sympathy. What has to happen for somebody to get sympathy? Something bad has to happen. So part of the mind can actually want something bad to happen to be able to get love and connection. And so it's fearing, because the other part of the mind doesn't want anything bad to happen. It's no, like the conscious mind is more negative things, but the subconscious mind can be like, that's how I get love and connection. So I need love. And so then it creates the feeling of fear. And the tricky part is, or another one that's very counterintuitive is this, is that a person can, let's say they get in a car accident. And so they feel like if they stay on alert, it's going to keep them safe. So then they hold on to the fear and the alert to then stay safe. Now, what they've linked up is holding on to fear is going to keep them safe and protect them for survival. Now, then all the time, what people do is they fight with their own mind. They go, just get my life, get my body to relax. But meanwhile, in their subconscious mind, it says holding on to fear is important for survival. And then they're like, just let me relax my nervous system. But holding on to fear is important for survival. And so they fight themselves all of the time. And they wonder why they don't get anywhere, because they're just trying to relax instead of rewire the miswired mind programming. And so the thing we need to really understand is the mind, everything it does for a reason. And so if we come from the awareness that everything the mind does, it does for a reason. If it's holding on to fear, we ask the question, why is it holding on to fear? And then instead of fighting and struggling, reprogram the mind. So one thing that I did is I started telling myself, because I held on to fear to keep me on alert. And so I started reprogramming my mind that said, holding on to fear is not keeping me safe. Holding on to fear is like holding on to a kick me sign. It's attracting more and more problems and attracting more and more problems. Let me get rid of this kick me sign. And so as I rewired my mind and then started programming in feelings of safety, I made a huge transformation, because I had already tried by that point the meditation, the relaxation, the binaural beat. Like I had been relaxing for years and it wasn't working. But then when I reprogrammed my mind to actually let go of the fear, it was easier, pivotal. It created that real change. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. And can you, for our audience, also shed a little bit of light on some of the steps or something particular that's important within this process of rewiring? Can you walk us through how this would, in theory, happen?
Absolutely. And so if we were to simplify it, let's say this. Number one, a foundation that's needed. So I call my process the GIFT method, right? And it's GIFT. And the first one is get new positive mind program and optimism. Now, why is that important? For a few reasons. First and foremost, optimism speeds up healing. So we want to speed up the body's healing. The second thing is that the more we create positive expectation and optimism, the easier it is to let go of the negative. So if you expect negative things to happen, so a lot of times people might be in a place of worry, like fear, worry. Now, if they're fearful and worrying, and then you say, let go of fear. If their mind is programmed for negative expectation, that negative thing is going to happen, that negative thing, it's hard to let go of negativity. So step G, very simply, is get new healthy mind programming, which is get a vision, get new positive expectation, all of that. But it goes beyond, we've all heard of get a vision. And I would say that's a good idea. And it's hugely lacking because our mind works in patterns. It doesn't work in vision, just a vision. It works in patterns, neural pathways. And so it's about establishing new positive neural pathways and new programming. So in other words, simply put, if somebody's mind has a pattern of worry or a pattern of negative expectation or a pattern, it's starting to put in the positives, the repatterning of the mind. And I know that so often people want to jump right into the negative because they think, let me just get rid of the negative. And if I do, my mind is going to be positive. Yeah. But that's like me saying, as soon as I stop speaking English, I'll know how to speak German. Mm-hmm. Not exactly. The mind doesn't, it works based on neural pathways, mm-hmm. right? So just because we get rid of something doesn't mean something else pops in. So we have to, yeah. So anyway, so step G is about get new healthy mind programming, part of which is factor 1, which has to do with optimism. Step I, which is the next one, so gift, is identify the specific negative. So then once somebody identifies the problem, then I ask them to do the 180 shift. So in other words, if their problem is fear, then they go to safety. If they're identifying anger, they might go to making a pattern of being kind. So it's really about starting to establish new neural pathways to start letting go of the old. Yeah. Then step F is free your mind. So understand why the mind wants to hold on to it. Does it feel like, for example, somebody who has a pattern of anger, they might feel like if they don't get angry, like they might feel like anger is keeping them safe, that they have to stand up for themselves. And if they don't have anger, people are going to take advantage of them and hurt them. So they go into anger to keep themselves safe. Now, a lot of times what people might just judge from the outside, they go, oh, that person's an angry person all the time. But why? But why? Mm-hmm. And so that step F is saying, why is your mind holding on to the issue? And then, and which might be keeping you safe. Or some people, they feel like if I get angry, I'm going to get my way. And so it's understanding those links, identifying why is the mind holding on to it. And then step T is about then stepping into the transformation. Okay, so now that we've started to create a change, now what are some actionable things that you could do to start stepping into the transformation and whatnot? So it's really about it's a real shift. And yeah, get new health. The reason this is important also, let me put another example on it. Simple example. Let's say there's a woman who has been really hurt. She felt like her husband cheated on her. He left, he abandoned her, and she feels like she's never, ever going to have another relationship ever again. And I say, just let go of the hurt. Let go of the upset. Now, how easy is it for her to just let go of the hurt and let go of the upset if she feels like she's never going to have a relationship again? It's not that easy. But let's say she starts getting a vision moving forward where she feels like she's actually going to have a new relationship and it could be great. And she's starting to get an optimistic outlook. And then I say, okay, now you see this hurt with your ex. Could you let that go, that pattern go completely so you can start stepping into even more of your future? Now it's much easier to realistically let it go because the mind has something to move forward to. So it is a process of incentivizing the mind and saying, here's a vision to look forward to. So let's go of the negative. So it is a process, but so it's getting the new healthy mind programming, the new vision, but then also the new patterns moving forward, identifying the problem, and then seeing that it's not really serving you. So for example, going back to anger. If somebody is wired at a deeper level, that it's keeping them safe and helping them to stand up for self, they would flip that and instead say, wait a second, anger is actually creating more problems. It's keeping me it attracts more problems and more angry situations, and it's not really getting my way. And so they'd develop a better way to do it through respect or through kindness or through communicating what it is that they want. So it's very practical and logical, but also understanding that we've really got to change the way we see things.
Yes. And thank you, Brandy, for walking us through this. Of course, for those who want to do a deeper dive, you have offerings also on your website. Your book, Master Your Mind and Energy to Heal Your Body, it's not just a powerful story. It's really a framework for transformation. And what I really love about it is so compassionate. You are so compassionate. This is not about pointing fingers. Oh, this person is so angry, or this, or it's really peeling back the layers. What is behind it? There's a reason for it. And how can we transmute this? You're really helping people worldwide reframe what is possible for them. And I would like to know is, since your book has been published, has any of the response shaped or surprised you?
No, people have been loving it. Yeah. If I'm going to be always impeccable with my words, one person said, "This is the best book I've ever read." And I was like, I was surprised only because not on the topic. On the topic, I think everything makes sense and it's logical, but she's just, this is the best writing. And to me, I never planned on being an author. I didn't say I'm going to grow up and be an author. I wrote the book because I wanted people to understand what to do and how to heal. And so that would be something. But other than that, I think that it's just been beautiful. It's just been people understanding that you can make a change. Now, if I were to, by the way, if I could just add one simple thing, like one ridiculously simple thing that people could start doing to just start lifting and repatterning, I would say this. And it's ridiculously simple, probably too simple that some people are going to say, "Oh, it's too simple. I don't need to do that." But if we think about where I was, injured, in extreme pain, on morphine, just an absolute mess. Now, to reprogram our minds, and I mentioned getting new positive neural pathways, it takes some repetition. And like a simple way to think about it is like when we learn the alphabet. If somebody wants to learn the alphabet, what do? They learn the alphabet, they get it in over and over again, and then we learn the alphabet. So for me, to suddenly get extreme happiness and positivity into my mind and emotions over and over again consistently, it would have been pretty much impossible. There were days I didn't want to live, and I was a roller coaster of trying to be positive. And also, I had been using meditation to just check out and bliss out. But then when I was in life, it was back to reality, and it wasn't. So that's where I was. So what I started doing to crack the process is I started just listening. I would pick a song. And one of the songs that I picked was "It's a Beautiful Day" by U2. Now, some people are going to hear this and they're going to immediately think, "Oh, a happy playlist." And I would say, no, not the happy playlist is great. But I picked this song and I listened to it like an exercise where I would take it in and just amplify my emotions over and over as much as possible. And a way to think about it is like a wedding song versus a happy playlist. If you listen to a wedding song and you hear it and you just melt, that's the power of a song. And so I started just doing it over and over again. Now I would amplify it as an exercise and just get good at it, doing the same ones over and over again. Why? Well, because there's also studies that show that as you listen to music in extreme bliss, you can trigger the release of dopamine and positive biochemistry, which I needed some of that. And of course, good for our health, motor skills, everything. So I would literally do that over and over and over and over. And it's like compound interest. So I was just amplifying and bringing it in and amplifying and bringing it in and amplify it and bringing it in, that I started to lift myself and started to feel better. Now, of course, I also identified the negative and got rid of that because that was some heavy stuff too. But the combination of lifting and then releasing is really powerful. The way you want to think about lifting and releasing is kind of like walking. When we walk somewhere, what do? We take a step forward, release the past, take a step forward, release the past. So that's what I was doing, is, bringing that in. But my point is it can help lift, and it's so simple. But the idea of me being able to, on my own, access extreme positivity over and over again wouldn't have been realistic for the state that I was in. And so by using music as like a cheat or a hack to just borrow the emotions from it over and over again, helped me to then get good at this skill of bringing in positive emotions. It was a cheat sheet, if you will, to help me get good at it.
That's a fantastic hack. That's a fantastic cheat, or I would even just call it an accelerator. And I personally find music extremely powerful as well. Also because there's something about the frequency that we expose ourselves to, particularly with music, or also finding, of course, it's not as easy as hitting play on your device, but finding these moments of awe. It can be different things for different people. It could be an amazing sunset. It could be perceiving something intricate in nature, or maybe just even watching people who are very loving with each other, but not as easy to put on repeat as the piece of music. I think that's really brilliant.
Exactly. Not only that, but I would literally, like, if I listened to half of the song and I went through half of it and I was not getting if I only got my emotions up to a level 4 or 5, like, I would listen to it over and over, like an exercise, like, okay, didn't do it good enough. Let me do it again. All right. So it was such an exercise to say, okay, how much can I use this to intentionally cultivate the strongest emotions that I possibly can. So yeah, it was an exercise.
It's so brilliant. And we literally, for most of us, we have this at our fingertips. I wonder, maybe you have something you could share also, that because this is very powerful, maybe there's something you can share with regard to self-sabotage, which that often doesn't come from a lack of will, but it comes from deeply embedded subconscious loops. And even if we're very willing to heal and we take a lot of the right steps, there might still be the self-sabotage popping up. How do you help people identify this so they can be very aware of what's happening, if something's happening that actually might hold their healing back?
Absolutely. So that really goes back to the miswired mind programming, which is, so let's say somebody is working on healing themselves and they feel like they don't deserve it, or they deserve punishment or guilt, or like mine, for example, I had this survivor's guilt. So if I feel guilty for surviving, then if I'm happy and healthy and loving and living life, then I'm going to feel more and more guilty. So it's better if I was at that time in an absolute mess. And or some people have a subconscious fear that, like, I've worked with people who felt if they healed, their husband might leave, or their wife might leave, or whatnot. And so there's always, it's like, what is the underlying fear? What is the miswired mind programming? It could even be self-image, where people they see themselves as like their mother, and their mother was always sick. And so then they go to get better and their self-image is like, no, honey, you're sick. Remember, this is who you are. And so it's it's always, sabotage is just another way of saying there is some type of subconscious link that is opposite of getting better. And when we really rewire it, that it is safer, it is better, you deserve a great life, you can, it aligns and you feel like this aliveness, which is, it's a beautiful transformation.
It is, Brandy. And there's something so deeply radical about self-healing. It shifts not just the person, the individual, but it shifts their surroundings, their family, their circle of friends, the collective field, if you so will.
You're so right.
Yeah. And I can't help but think there's so many things we are constantly exposed to nowadays, whether it's from our own history and experience, or just switching off the television or reading the news. So there's so many things that are impacting us unless we're very well aware of them and really curate how we intake them, and to stand in our full sovereignty, to actually reclaim our healing, to self-heal. And again, what I just said, it not just affects us, it affects the collective field. What do you think it would look like if more people reclaim their innate healing power?
That's why I call it the gift method, is for that very reason. This is the way I look at it. And before I say that, I have to comment on this. When you say it's all around us, okay, so there are songs about dying for people, for example. So once I started to become aware of my patterns, I realized that that song might be even playing on the way to the hospital. So you start to go, oh my God, it's if you've ever worked on like a pattern of self-criticism or something, and you start to go, oh my gosh, like it's all around me.
Yeah.
That consciousness, you start to realize, oh, this pattern. So it is. And you start to realize, oh my, you become aware that the patterns that have been affecting us, it's mind blowing. But, and we change the people around us. And that's the way I look at it is like this. Anytime we have an illness or pain or whatnot going on, it is like a spiritual check engine light. It is like a check engine light on a car. When the check engine light comes on, it's telling you that something is off. And when we have illness, it is telling us something is off. And when we identify it and transform it, it's a gift. It changes our life. It changes its gift. For example, I've worked with people, let's say a person who had extreme knee injury. And part of their pattern had to do with self-criticism and deeper insecurities, but then just criticism in general and whatnot. But this person, he had also been losing millions of dollars in his business. And so part of what happened is as he changed the pattern of criticism and whatnot, but as we changed some of the patterns that were going on, he started, of course, showing up better to life and to his business, and then succeeding, and then continued to change his patterns regarding money and business and whatnot, and went on to make a lot of money and be very successful. But if we think about somebody who spends the next 40, 50, 60 years of their lives criticizing themselves every day because they have a pattern of self-criticism, or they spend the next 40, 50, 60 years of their life with self-love and really feeling that, and self-kindness and feeling confident and good about themselves, it's a completely different life. It's a completely different result. And like you said, even the people that we're attracting in life and everything. So it becomes, when we take this skill. So when you said, what would it look like if everybody in this world learned that's my hope, is that everybody goes, oh, there's a check engine light. What pattern do I need to change, or what patterns? And then they change them. And it's a sense of empowerment. When you can heal yourself, it's okay. This skill is really cool. What else do I want to change? It's pivotal. It's life-changing. And that's it. You change your health, change your life. It's beautiful.
Yes, and that is also what resonates so much with me about your work. It's not just about healing the body, it's about restoring wholeness. And Brandy, if you could transmit one single truth to every person listening, something they could maybe write on a note and stick on their mirror or speak to themselves each day, what would that be?
It would be ultimately that healing is a skill, and mastering our mind is a skill. And so often we learn math, we learn walking and running and speaking in multiple languages or computers. But if we master this skill of the mind, it's pivotal for health, for life, happiness, relationships, love, everything.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Brandy. I really enjoyed this conversation. For those amongst the listeners who would like to do a deeper dive, learn more about you, learn more about your work and your offerings, would like to know how to best connect with you, where can they find you?
My website is brandygillmore.com, and I have my book, and there's also a free training on my website. I think you're going to have a link or whatnot to that. And yeah, that is my biggest hope, is for everybody to really empower themselves. And I have to say, you're beautiful. I love your heart. It's been such a pleasure connecting with you, Ariana.
Thank you so much. Received very gratefully. And it's been wonderful to connect with you too. And thank you for everything you do. It has a massive ripple effect.